Hi everybody. Thank you. Glad that you guys could make it for this session again. Today we will be diving deep into India with Mr. Ruchit. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. From India. He is the fund manager and analyst at SBI Mutual Funds. Yeah, so I think I will let him do the introduction for himself. So without further ado, Mr. Ruchit, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Esther, and
No problem.
yeah. So, evening, guys. Thank you so much for joining in. I guess it's pretty late out there in Malaysia. I guess it's about 9 o'clock out there, something. So, thanks for joining in, and I'm going to try and walk you through what India is as a country, and what the economic prospects for the country really look like, and some bits about how our sort of society is structured and economically. So I do have some slides. I will walk you through them. And, we are a large country, right? We're about second largest country in the world. Uh, in terms of humanity, we'd be about 1/6 of the world's population, right? So it's not difficult that everywhere in the world you'll pop around and see some of the other Indians out there, right? So we're going to be around a lot. We're a large number of people, but we're also the sixth largest economy in the world at this point in time, right? Probably by end of this year, we'll be the fifth largest economy in the world, and pretty soon, I guess, from a next decade perspective, India is likely to become the third largest economy after China and the United States. And that also in terms does not really reflect the potential of the country. When you look at it, how big really is India, right? When we talk of say 1.4 odd billion people, and you can't really sort of size it up in that sense. And the chart on the left hand side kind of shows you how big the country really is. I mean, the different markings are carve outs are actually different provinces in the country, and each province itself is like a mini country by itself. So I am out of Mumbai, which is in the state of Maharashtra, which is as large as the country of Japan itself in terms of the overall population out there. So it is a fairly large country, and therefore it has a lot of growth potential going forward. And how big when you think of it this way, right? So even when you say you're a $2.7 trillion economy, potentially about $3 trillion by the end of this year. But it looks like, hey, you really are large, and how much larger can you actually get? But when you think of it, India as, again, you go back at an individual state level, you're seeing a very small number of countries actually fit in. And at an aggregate level, that country is just about $2,000 per capita income. I think Malaysia is about $17,000 per capita income that's there. China's at about $10,000 per capita income. So for a country like India, even for us to just reach the level of income that China has would take the size of the economy nearly 5 times in a fairly short period of time that's there. Right? Now, how is our country, right? And it's a very unique country in that sense. We are a democratic republic with a written constitution. Our constitution was actually inspired by the Constitution of the United States. Our founding fathers looked at all sorts of constitutions around the world and kind of took inspiration from many, and chiefly the United States was one of those countries where we were fairly inspired by. It is a federal structure. So, while there is one large central government that's there, but there are 28 provinces and 8 union territories, and each of those has a separate government by itself. Within the provinces itself, regions will have their own local government that's there. So it is getting a more and more sort of a decentralized structure that's there. The central government is primarily responsible for the large ticket things like finance, handling of defense, foreign affairs, etc. Whereas the local or the provincial governments are more responsible for things like healthcare, education, infrastructure, etc. We are also one of the most unique countries in the world in that sense that we have had universal suffrage from day one, ever since we became a republic. India got its independence from the British in 1947, and in 1950 we declared ourselves a republic, a constitutional republic. And from the first day of the republic and first elections itself, each and every Indian got the right for voting in elections. It's a unique feature of our nation in that sense that we've given equal rights to everybody on the day we actually turned a republic. Not a lot of countries actually had that kind of a thing. And we're a very large democracy as well. I mean, 800 million odd voters were eligible for voting in the last election, which happened in 2019. And out of those 800 odd million, we had a turnout close to 650 odd million people that's there. The next round of elections, which will likely happen in 2024, is likely to see over 1 billion people being eligible to vote. And it is one of the largest democracies in that sense, where free and fair elections have always been held without hindrance to all. So it is unique as a political system out there. So how is our economy in that, right? We are a fairly services-driven economy, right? India is known very much globally for services, and in there we are very well known for the technology side of the pie. A large Indian technology companies have been world leaders across in terms of the kind of software work that they do. We're known as the outsourcing hub of the world, along with, say, Philippines. India has been among the world's leader in terms of technology outsourcing that's there. We are also one of the world's largest textile manufacturers. A lot of the global brands, be it Zara, Nike, and Armani, or Gap, would be manufacturing their products out of India and India's textiles outside. So we're close to 100 billion plus in textile exports globally as well. And we're a fairly capitalistic economy also. While we do have lots of social structures and social measures for the welfare of the common people, but by and large, we are a very capitalistic economy in that sense. We have one of the most vibrant sort of equity markets in the world. We're the 9th and 10th largest exchanges in the world are based out of India. In fact, one of the world's oldest exchanges is based out of India. The Bombay Stock Exchange was founded way back in the 1800s. It's Asia's first stock exchange as well. Our exchanges have listed companies which have close to $3 trillion in terms of their market capitalization. And we have a ton more which are likely to sort of come off for equity raising in the coming few years as well. Socially, India has done very well the last few years. So from a country which was fairly poor, we made fairly large strident moves on developing the country. Nearly 100% of Indians have a bank account now. There was a concerted effort by the government of India to make sure that every Indian had a bank account that's there. And I'll talk to you the importance of what happened with that sort of an initiative. We have a fairly high amount of telecommunications presence as well. So nearly 900 odd million Indians have a mobile device. And considering that out of 1.4 billion people, close to 300 million are children, that means nearly 90% of all adults in the country have a mobile connection out there. And 1/3 of that have a smartphone. Therefore, Indians are online. Indians use a lot of applications across the world leading apps, and do a lot of business and transactions using their mobile devices as well. We now have nearly 100% of all households with electricity. A stark improvement considering that just about 2 decades back, only half the country had electricity available to them. Now the effort is to make sure that everybody has electricity 24/7, and perhaps within the next 5 to 7 years, that's a goal that the government is likely to achieve as well. We've done significantly well on expanding our physical infrastructure as well. And that's important because as we've been connecting more and more of households across the country, villages, remote areas, it has improved the ability for the country to do a lot of economic activity as well. In terms of technology, right, we are amongst the world's leaders on the software side of it. We are the world's leader on pharmaceutical exports. 50% of the world's vaccines are actually made in India. More than a third of the world's pharmaceutical drugs source their chemical compounds called the APIs out of India. Indian pharmaceutical companies are the world leaders in providing many drugs across cancer, HIV, etc. On the technology side, there isn't a piece of software that isn't touched by an Indian out there, whether it be advanced software for NASA or be it advanced software for the upcoming sort of autonomous driving cars as well, including Tesla as well. So you see that India has been fairly up the curve on the technology side, and it has been driven a lot by government initiatives, government efforts, as well as sort of the broad sort of initiative of the Indian entrepreneurs as well, and which has led to a very large number of world-leading companies as well. A lot of the world has seen new companies. For example, Flipkart is India's version of Amazon. It's now owned by Walmart. The founders sold it off to them, but it is as large as Amazon in India as well. We have had our own version of Netflix. Hotstar was a domestically grown OTT app, which was as big as Netflix in India on launch, and at this point in time has a larger number of subscriber base than Netflix also has in India. Right? India's version of AirAsia is Indigo. It has a significantly large air fleet, competes very significantly on the low-cost fare side, and there are efforts to expand Indigo's network to Southeast Asia as well. So Singapore was the first country in Southeast Asia that Indigo went to. Before the pandemic, it had gone into Vietnam, China, and it was looking to sort of expand into Philippines and Malaysia as well. We have our own version of Airbnb, so Vista Rooms is there. Just like you have Touch and Go and Boost as a wireless payment contactless app system for payments, we have many versions, including the largest one being Paytm as well. So India has a fairly thriving, vibrant economy with a lot of new age, new technology companies being founded out there. On the environmental side as well, India is one of the few countries in the world which actually has made very significant amount of progress on the environmental front as well. A few years back at COP21, right, a lot of countries sort of had signed up to make progress on their climate change goals, on being much more ahead of the curve in terms of pollution, etc. And amongst the world's largest economies out there, and the most developed economies out there, India is perhaps the only country that's in compliance with the 2-degree centigrade increase agreement that was done out in Paris in 2021. When you think of it that way, it's a poor country, a developing nation, which actually has climate change targets which are much better than any of the other Western developed nations in the world, far outstripping what even the United States does. And then India has done a lot of innovative stuff around climate change as well. So, for example, we have one of the world's largest solar parks being set up in the states of Gujarat and Rajasthan. These will be enough and sufficient to power nearly the entire state, those two states, in terms of just from solar power as well. We are setting up among the world's largest electric two-wheeler companies in the country. Right? The idea being that at some point in time, all scooters and motorcycles being used would be electric, and not just for Indians. We will look to sort of expand them into the export side as well. So there is an inherent advantage that India is building on the climate side, and it probably goes to the fact that as a culture and as a nation, we respect nature, we worship nature. It's part of our ethos to sort of look at the environment as part of the natural being. So if you go back and probably read a little bit about the ancient history of India, the gods that Indians used to worship used to be basic aspects of nature, such as fire, water, wind. In fact, some of our gods are based on water and wind and fire. So it's part of our culture and our ethos, and it's not surprising, therefore, that we're kind of leading the world on being more environmentally conscious. That's there. In terms of our judicial system, yes, there are lots of talks. India's judicial system is fairly slow, we're fairly poor, but it's an independent system. We have a fairly large independent judicial system with a fairly decentralized structure as well. You do have the Supreme Court of India, which is the interpreter of the Constitution and the laws of India. And there are different specialized courts out in each state, which would look after matters individual to each state that's there. So in some, India is a fairly sort of a unique country. At start of it, it kind of became a democracy before it even became rich. When you go back in history and look at all nations through their time periods, most nations became democracies after they had become fairly wealthy. If you look at the United Kingdom, or if you look at France or Germany or Japan, or even the United States for that matter, every part of those countries, they became rich and then they became democratic. India became democratic on day one, even before it had the opportunity to become rich as well. Therefore, it's probably going to be one of the few countries in the world which likely, as it succeeds going forward, would show that democratic approaches can also be fairly successful. So I'll pause here. I'm done with the set of slides that I have. So if there are any questions any of you would like to have to understand India a little better, our people, our culture, our economy, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ruchit. Okay, so uh, so Sashi said very curious to find out about India's Netflix, but there's a question from Izo. He asked, curious how the e-hailing business thrives in India, assuming Grab and Uber are available, along with the Indian alternative of the both. In Malaysia, e-hailing is used to have a few, but now Grab monopolizes the market. They bought Uber Malaysia. So do you think the big international brands will ever monopolize the market, rendering the Indian alternative crippled?
Okay, so interesting question. So when in India, ride hailing started off with essentially the entry of Uber into India as sort of an experimental opportunity. And then at some point in time, fairly closely on the back of it, you had Indian entrepreneurs which also launched their versions of ride hailing. So there was a company called Meru, which still exists, which was one of the first Indian ride-hailing companies out there. But it wasn't app-based. It was more of telephonic. You would call them up and then you book a cab for you and come back. Then Uber came with the app-based system, and then everybody sort of worked on that. And in India right now, we really have Ola, which is India's version of Uber. And it is a fairly large domestically driven company. It has investors from across the world, right? Even Didi is an investor into Ola as well. So while there is a large diversified investor base into the company, but it remains Indian at heart and probably works to sort of take on Uber globally in many places. So Ola has expanded into Europe, where they have launched services in the United Kingdom. They had launched services in Europe, such as Spain as well. Pre-pandemic, they had some part of going into Southeast Asia as well. So yes, I mean, we are an open economy, and therefore you see global majors come here. But a lot of the Indian companies are sort of holding their fort, and they have also been able to innovate at the same pace, right? One of the advantages that happens is that because a lot of the new age businesses are more technology oriented, more based on apps and having a tech background, that's kind of where India's strength really lies. Our ability to write software, our ability to do very quick software development and application development, which kind of helps a lot of the Indian entrepreneurs also take on the global guys at a similar pace at which they are also able to innovate.
Thank you. Izo, does that answer your question? Okay, nice. Jacqueline, would you like to unmute and ask the question?
Okay.
No
Okay, so India is always known for its IT proficiency. Like, it's just so great in IT, and I'm just curious on how can India be like the best in the IT industry, and maybe their software innovations and things like that.
Okay. So it actually goes back a little bit of history. So Indians were ruled by the British for nearly 200 plus years, right? And during that time period, one of the things that we did actually gain by having the British rulers was the command over the English language. Indians have learned the English language very, very well. And English is an integral part of software development, right? The whole coding part of it is done in the English language in that sense. So the ability to comprehend logic and comprehend the language itself is something that's a natural advantage to us. The second is that when we look at the traditional choices of Indians in terms of education, they are fairly math and engineering oriented, right? We've not been a lot of art or scientific oriented, but a lot on engineering and mathematically oriented. And culturally, that's something that's a lot palatable to a lot of people. You be an engineer, and you could be out there in the world developing either mechanical stuff or build buildings, etc. And engineering requires you to have a fairly good proficiency on maths. And when you look at software, it requires a good ability to build logic and develop things. And the expertise and knowledge that you gain while you're learning maths and engineering can be applied very well in the software side of it. So the combination of the two things, where our proficiency over the English language, and as well as the ability to think logically and as well as sequentially as do with doing engineering work or mathematical work, is where we've been able to sort of really become great on the technology side as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm interested in B2B business in India. So this is related to one of my project. If we want to approach Indian company to sell like a product, who should we approach? Like, is it the middle manager that makes the decision, or is it the top level manager that make the decision?
It depends on the size of the company that you are looking to engage with. So typically, if it's going to be, let's say, for example, as with any other large organizations globally, right? If you're going to be interacting with a company which probably has north of $50 million in revenues, you're going to be having an engagement with, say, a procurement manager of the company. And the procurement manager may not necessarily be at the top of the management structure. If you're going to look at a smaller company that's there, right? Somebody who does sales of, say, 5, 10, $20 million, you're probably going to be talking directly with the founder of the company. A lot of Indian companies who are small in size, they tend to be founder driven. You have one or two entrepreneurs who would have established the business and would still be running the business that's there. It's only when they start becoming larger and larger is when they add a lot more people who do more and more of the nitty-gritty of the work. So it's going to be who you're going to target. So if you're looking at large corporations doing $50, $100 million revenues, then you're going to look at perhaps targeting the procurement manager out there. If you're looking at smaller size companies, then you're better off trying to reach out to the founders themselves.
All right, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Just feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask away.
Okay. Hi, Ruchit.
Hi, sir.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
I was just curious about this stigma that sometimes I often hear about India. I don't know whether it's a stigma or whether it's a reality today, where India being one of the countries where there's a huge inequality gap, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I mean, is it still that way, or is it just like the past?
So we have made a lot of progress on reducing inequality, right? So one of the efforts of the government has been that what are the core causes of inequality, right? Is that you need to have access to education for the younger generation so that they can learn and progress more in life. You need to have access to some of the basics of life, right? Whether it's housing, electricity, water, all of those basic facilities that are there. Because if I don't have to worry about whether I have drinking water in my home or not, I can focus my efforts on actually doing something better, right? I can focus on being either an entrepreneur or studying and learning to sort of do better and get a better job. That's how you kind of. So over the last 15, 20 years, a large part of the government's effort has been that how do you reduce the inequality that's there? And first way you can actually target to reduce inequality is to really make sure that every Indian has the basics in life sorted out, right? So today, if you are at the bottom of the pyramid, right, you're likely going to get a house funded by the government of India. You will be given water, electricity, cooking gas. You'll also be given free healthcare. So all the basics that are there, that's been taken care of, and even you'll be also be funded for basic education as well. The idea is to enable people so that look, your basics are taken care of. We're going to make sure that you are have enough ample opportunity then to really focus on doing business, which is why if you see in the last 10 years is when India has so many world appreciated companies bubbling up. We had our first round of serious entrepreneurship in the 90s when the software development boom happened, right? And once the software development boom was finished, we needed another round of it. And in the last 10 years, we've really seen another boom happen, right? Which is where we have world-leading companies on fintech, education technology. We have on things like, for example, like you have Grab, which is on food delivery in Malaysia. Here we have companies like a Zomato and a Swiggy, right, which are sort of really doing serious work on food delivery. And Zomato's like is going to list tomorrow on the exchanges for the first time at a $10 billion valuation, right? So I mean, so that's and they aren't. And these are all entrepreneur-driven companies. These are people who dreamt of the company 10 years back. And the idea is that, so yes, there was a lot of inequality that's there. There still exists a fair degree of inequality still in the country, but progressively it's reducing. And it's reducing is because you have a lot of entrepreneurial activity kicking up in the country, given all the efforts by the government that's been made.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ruchit.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Ruchit. Just adding. Okay, Ilham, you want to go first?
Okay.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So yeah, my question is a bit long. So recently I saw a post on Reddit, I think, that shows a building in India where the walls are like literally covered with posters and banners of certification courses, mostly in engineering softwares and those kinds of niche skills. And then I saw in the comment that Indian people said that there are an abundance of workers in India that are highly qualified in those specifically niche fields, but in the country itself there are not enough demand for people with those kind of skills, right? And they also said that some of those certifications are not even legitimate. So my question is, how do you think does this abundance of workers, which are maybe qualified, maybe not, how will they affect the economy? Will they push it, help it grow, or will they just create more unemployment, or what else? Thank you.
It's a good question. See, I think that's been one of the things that's been there as a challenge in front of the government for a long time. So, close to 35% of the population would be under the age of 21. And you have a fairly large number of them would be coming into the working age population that's there. A lot of them are fairly well educated as well. A lot of engineers, a lot of accountants, and people coming through. Now, that's been the focus of the government that we need to invest behind creating job opportunities for a lot of people. And for the government that's there, or for the system that's there, the biggest area in which job opportunity that can be created is first was to liberalize the economy to a large extent, which is where it's an ongoing effort where more and more sectors are being opened up for investments. The second is to also incentivize investments into various parts of the economy that's there. Just to give you an example, 2 years back, we opened up and incentivized rather the manufacturing of mobile devices into India. And we had Foxconn, which actually shifted a factory out from China into India as well. And similarly, we saw an effort by Samsung, which also set up a mobile manufacturing outfit in India as well. And in fact, Samsung now exports mobile phones from that facility to the world as well. So there is an effort towards liberalizing the economy, attracting investments by giving incentives to manufacturers to come and do business here, as well as invest into infrastructure, because one of the more critical parts of it is for any economy is that how good or bad is your infrastructure. And companies are attracted by the fact that you have great infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, and stuff. And that investment itself by its own nature creates a lot of jobs. So it is a challenge in front of the government. So they have to make sure that sufficient number of jobs are being created, either by investments or by encouraging investments and enabling entrepreneurs. By liberalizing the economy, by cutting down on red tape and all sorts of bureaucratic processes. So yeah, it's a challenge out there. We haven't yet fully solved for that problem, but I think governments are seized of that problem, and everyone's doing their level best to sort of push the economy that's there. We are large. We're a very large economy, and in terms of the number of people as well. So we like the Titanic, right? It takes time to sort of move the ship around, but once it moves in a particular direction, then it can just gather speed that's there. I mean, just to think of it, you know, 20 years back, India wasn't there on the world's technology map at all. And today, we're the world's leading software services provider. Similarly, on pharmaceuticals, 25 years back, we were nowhere on the software services, the pharmaceutical services map. And today, we are among the world's largest provider of medicines, right? So it takes time, but I guess eventually when things move through, we'll probably get going faster.
I see. Thanks a lot, Ruchit.
Thank you for your questions. Does anybody have any more questions?
Yes, I have another question actually.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So it is safe to say that Leaderonomics is a learning and development company with focus on soft skills, right? But from what you said, it seems that hard skills is actually more important in India. So I want to know how important soft skills learning actually is for Indian company, because this is the industry we are working on.
It is extremely important because as companies grow, you will need to add more talent and you will need to retain talent as well. And the ability of an organization to grow is a function of how well you are staffed, how good your people are, and the ability and time you spend being upskilling your people that's there. In many cases, and this is probably true not just for India, but all sort of capitalist economies or free market economies in that sense. You can only take the business to a certain level with basic hard skills, right? Beyond that, for the company to progress, for you yourself to progress, you need a set of skills which are very different, right? You need to become a leader at some point in time. You need to be able to manage people. You need to be able to sort of think strategically as well. And therefore, soft skills is one of the most significant aspects that India will need to build going forward.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
I'm Jacqueline. I have another question. So
Yeah.
this is like a follow-up question from my previous question.
Okay.
So India being the best leading software development, like for the software development, is it impossible to sell an application or a software product to India, like because they can replicate it easily or things like that? Or are there certain targets, like target companies that can be approached for products like that? Or is it entirely impossible to really just sell a new software because they can easily replicate the layout, things like that?
So there are fairly strong data privacy and intellectual property right laws in India. So if you have a unique product that's there, and you probably need to just get it registered with the Intellectual Property Rights Commission out here, which will help you protect the basic logic and of the product that's there. So yeah, I mean, you can have a unique product and sell it out in the Indian market. I mean, by that logic, we should have had an Indian version of Microsoft Excel a long time back, or an Indian version of Zoom a long time back, but we don't have that. I mean, the laws are there so that they enable protection of IPR so that everybody thrives.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I have a question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to work in India?
Okay. So you're gonna be okay with the weather, but I guess coming from Southeast Asia, all of you are gonna be okay with the weather that's there. So we are hot 70% of the time, then few months it's rainy, and maybe 15 days of the year it gets a little cooler or colder depending on which part of the country you're going to be in. So be okay with the weather that's there. It is a large country, and therefore you will see a lot of people. So you really have to go into the real hinterlands to find no people. But otherwise, if you're going to be working in the large cities, it's going to be you're going to be facing a lot of people that's there. It can overwhelm you, but Indians are fairly approachable and very friendly people. We will be very happy to sort of take anybody along with us on any journey. And with in my company as well, we have people who come in from across the world who work for us. So uh, we are a friendly bunch of people. We are happy to sort of invite people to come to work to our country that's there. But yeah, be okay with the, it's like, I mean, it's like with any other country that you go to, right? It'll take you first 1 or 2 years to sort of figure out where your bearings are. The great advantage India has is that almost everybody speaks English. A lot of people will be very proficient at it, but even the common man on the street will understand a few words of English that's there. So that's an advantage that you will have. So it'll be easier to sort of get into going around, getting a few basics, on your own. You don't need somebody to help guide you along. So language isn't a barrier for you in that sense. So it's uh, once you get over the hump of the culture, the people, the scale, then it's kind of easier to sort of work here as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Dia has a question in the chat. Do you want to unmute yourself or?
So the question that I want to ask is like, I was wondering because India is a federal state, and the state is autonomous, so they can make their own decision, right, in regards to like the government. Is there a difference in like the foreign investment that comes in? Like, probably there are more foreign investment concentrated in New Delhi compared to other states.
Yeah, so that does happen because being a federal structure, each state is competing with the other states for dollar investment that tends to happen. So every state will develop different policies depending on various factors that are there. And it's an open fair competition out there. We do see sometimes for a single investor or a single project, multiple states will make a bid for it, right? Like for example, there was at some point in time there was competition going on between various states to get Tesla's factory being built out in India. And while Tesla still hasn't made fully the decision where they're going to build out the factory, but we broadly know that one of the southern states in India has won the contract to sort of build the factory out there. So it's like in the US, states are independent. They will all compete with each other to do the best for their citizens. At the federal level, the government of India will help every state with whatever they need. So, if there are procedural issues, then they would impact every state. So they will work with the states to sort of ease them off. On the foreign services side, there will be effort to ensure that, the investment happens smoother. But yeah, it is competitive. So some states sometimes win a lion's share of the business, and some states tend to lose out.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think with that, we can close today's session. Thank you so much, Mr. Ruchit.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and wish you a good night and good luck for the rest of your internship and as well as for whatever next you're planning to do.
Yeah. Mr. Ruchit, is there any way that if the interns have any questions they want to contact you, how can they reach you?
Oh, you can just drop me an email. It's ruchitmehta@gmail.com. So I'll share it with Sashi and Esther, and they can pass on my email ID to you guys. And so feel free to drop an email if you want to reach out on that.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, guys, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to Mr. Ruchit. Yeah, so with that, I think we can end tonight's session here. Thank you, Mr. Ruchit, once again for
Thank you, guys.
telling us and sharing your insights. Yeah.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Ruchit.
Thank you.
Thank
Ashki, any
you.
announcements on your end?